G'day, welcome to another episode of Global Pause, Rethink the Future. So in today's podcast, I want to talk more about the concept of indivisibility. I always kind of crap on about it, I suppose in context to the way how we receive ourselves as a means towards the end, and ultimately the praxis that I'm advocating is a way of removing the marginal way that we receive ourselves when we presuppose our time is producible as an economic good and money lays claim to it. So I want to look at the way how, if that's the end that we're focused on, and so we're problematizing the way towards life is being indivisible, but because we're beholden to the being market orientated, it compromises that kind of orientation because, want is primary and it's more the want of life rather than anything else. So when I'm always advocating indivisibility, I thought, especially because we're dealing with a market-orientated way of life, and so we're dealing with the consumer market and we're dealing with the labour market, how would you see, what would be a way that we could see this thing kind of manifest, as it were, as a potential? So these are always thought bubbles. They're problematic in the sense that I formulate my thought when I'm talking. So, that's why I can kind of ramble on. But that's really what we're going to do. So I'm going to see if I can kind of frame it from the understanding that I've talked about, say, on prior episodes. So the consideration, I suppose, when we're looking at this thing, so indivisibility is the way that we're a means towards the end, like I said. So the means is your labouring and the end is what we consider our labouring to be orientated towards, which is life. Okay, so the end is what we presuppose, but we are marginal in the way that we receive ourselves when we receive our time as an economic good. So the economic good is secured, so if we're looking at it from the aspect of our leisure as being the preeminent good, we're always focused on that preeminent good. But because we're beholden to the way that we presuppose for life, our way is to make ourselves marginal or to make ourselves a means towards it. So when you're looking at how do you potentialise your time beyond the economic good, and I always crap on about saying the same thing, how do you potentialise your time beyond the how do you potentialise the economic good of your time beyond the way how we receive it? Well, I give context. Well, that is to temporalise place. So temporalising place is both the place as to where you would consider yourself to be a means, and obviously where you would be considered to be an end. So, when I look at the exception, so we are looking at being market orientated and what we presuppose, the orientation that business is focuses on when we are only considered to be a consumer, then they have to literally make an exception of that way to potentialise our time, so the indivisibility of our time, but to potentialise the marginality in the way how we receive it in order to see beyond it, so to harness the creativity. So harnessing the creativity is what is going to engender the indivisibility. All right, but the indivisibility have context with that you are both a means and an end. So when you're looking at, I know this is a kind of hard way to kind of frame it, but it always is. So in the scenario that we're talking about, okay, so let's say that there is, let's just say that there is a culture that's been engendered that talks about that they're focused on the indivisibility of our temporality. So I think, I always talk about the intangibles. When you're looking at the indivisibility of your temporality, it's beyond intangibles. It's an existential. It's got nothing to do with values as such. All right. So it's more primordial. It's looking at the sheer claim on our life. So when you're looking at, so let's just say that we have the culture that is engendered has participants that are, well, they're not participants, you're not participating in culture, you are the embodiment of that. So I always have to I have to always consider how I frame something, because that even even the way how I said that, it's like there's a distance between it. But when you're looking at a way of life that you embody, a way of life, you're immersed in that way of life, and there really is no inside or outside, as much as that there is an inside and outside relative to the presupposed way of life. I suppose that's the one thing that we have to give due consideration, especially when you're looking at an emergent culture from the current paradigm that we are facing off with. So, but let's just presuppose, like I always presuppose everything, let's just presuppose that there's enough people that they understand what they're doing, and so that what they're doing is that they're generating what we're focused on. So we're looking at potentializing your time beyond the economic good, temporalizing place through events. You got enough of an ecosystem of businesses and people that are supporting the businesses where you're engendering more events, and so you're that end part that people are focused on, the way how that they share, the way how that they're harnessing their agency is such that it's being demonstrated, it's being actualized. And so the actuality of it is such that it evidences the potential that the business, potentialized when it made an exception of your exchange. So obviously disposed of money in order to potentialize or to separate or to sever the claim that money has as the credit that justifies or not justifies, or you could say, if money is credit, well, you're given credit to be in the market because you have money. So in the scenario of a person going into the market in inverted commas, because they're never outside it, but if you're going somewhere to secure your want or to go satisfy a want, well, if you were to receive an exception from a business, well, your money, you're not giving credit for the money that you have. You're giving credit for the person that you potentially could be, I suppose, is one way of looking at it, because you got to potentialize a person for them to see beyond themselves, I suppose, is, and that's part of the initiation process that is undergone when you're looking at emergence. We're talking about emergence, you're talking about initiating actions, and I always keep on going on about it, but it's problematic when you're trying to frame something like it's there, but you got to think of the way you're structuring the steps so you don't lose people in the way how, especially when you're talking about surpassing the use of money, people just think it's fucking just crazy and you can't do it. So it's problematic from my perspective to try talk about it. I don't know why I'm being self-reflective about this anyway at the moment, but maybe it's just because it's just the nature of it. It's a little bit harder, and I never know whether or not what I'm saying actually makes any sense. I know it makes sense to me, but, I'm just like it's a bit of a sound bubble, isn't it? You're in your own head. Anyway, so the business is part of the ecosystem, and you've got people that have potentialized, so through what they do. So like I've said in prior episodes, it's about what you do. So what you do, you kind of giving credit for that, but you're part of a culture. So really it's the way how everybody takes their turn towards creating something that nobody can lay claim to, that they created it. Everybody's in their turns create it, and so nobody is responsible as much as that it animates in the turns that all of us take. So in that regards, you've got people that have, maybe given of their time in a way where they've potentialize their time beyond the economic good to give in the context of the creation of event. And so therefore, depending on the capability of the way how this thing emerges, that there's a context, say, for a business. So let's say, I'll give context to actually the business. I always talk about this, but, if a business is approaching you from intangibles, so let's say that there's candidates so it's not just about the money, it's about the meaning that you have when you're working for a business. So therefore the money can be marginal. It's not the preeminent thing that you're focused on. You're focusing on, meaning in your life, contributing to a greater good beyond yourself, the sharing of maybe with other people towards an end that you know that when you're working towards, it's something that's more meaningful than just your want. Okay, so the context which we're talking about obviously surpasses, values, but it's the same way of framing, say, a business could approach the people within the ecosystem or the culture, because they know the business is immersed in the culture. So there's no aligning with values. The business demonstrates that just like the people demonstrate it. So let's say you've got a business And you've got three people that are going to work for this business as part of the ecosystem, and these people are also part of the ecosystem. So they're all part of this cultural dynamic of a different way of giving and receiving, and everything else that I always crap on about. So in the context of when you're looking at the way how you're removing money, okay, because it's all about like potentializing your time, the indivisibility of your temporality. So we have to remove the credit that would we otherwise give money to secure our temporality. Okay, so literally you are, as much as I always say it's got nothing to do with money, it's got to do with the marginal way that we receive ourselves. But in order to evidence that we are not receiving ourselves as marginal, you literally are removing the use of money. So how do you do that when you're looking at the relationship between a business and potential employees, as it were? Now, we've gone from want to creativity. So literally the three people, say, that might be are going to be working for the business, they have that, like I said, there's no alignment. They're immersed in the culture. So there's no affinity, as it were. They just fit, and it might, like I said, it's got to do with the proficiency and other kind of considerations that will determine their candidacy. But let's just say that they all make the grade, as it were. But yet, the context which I'm trying to give here is that, say you got three, okay, and so you're looking at the way how you could potentialize a person's time beyond the economic good. So the way how that they receive the way how they define themselves as a means towards the end. So obviously, being an employee, you are a means, okay, as much as you might be working for the business. That is not aligned, but that is immersed in the same thing that you're focused on and that you have demonstrated. So in that regards, money is not as big an issue. Like I said, if a business is aligning with values in order to disinhibit you towards temporalizing place within the business as more of a ends rather than a means, well, the marginality of the way how that works is that you don't consider money to be the primary focus or motivating factor in your making a decision to work for that business. So in the scenario of a business that is immersed in the culture, it's exactly the same thing, but the level of intimacy or the claim on the person, on the business, is completely different. It's an order of magnitude. It's just totally removed because, like I said, in the other business, it's still based upon want. Here you're looking at the relation is moving to creativity. So the business is kind of like a means towards that. In that regards, it's just like it's enterprising a good. It might be focused still on looking at a specific market, but then it's the way how it's engaging people in like I said, we're talking about a civilizational enterprise, talking about a cultural dynamic. The business is considering what it does beyond the narrow scope of commercial activity and just looking at the way how it can potentialize its impact in the world at large. And so enterprise good as a organization kind of facilitates that because we're framing the whole issue with our way of life from the marginal way that we receive ourselves, all the fucking shit I always crap on about. So in the context of these three people. So let's say you got two people that get, I'll say it, I'm going to give it context just for one day, okay? So let's say that when they just, they've come on board to the business, all right, that one person says, I want, all right, for one day I don't want to be paid, okay? So one day I don't want to be paid, but what she's let's just say this she. So what she's doing is she wants that time that she would otherwise to be paid to be potentialized, so that the mean of her existence that she would otherwise be paid. So therefore, to be paid is to be given, money as credit to secure the end for yourself. In that context, she's making an exception of her being a means. Okay, she still has that, but all right. So she's saying, yes, I want to make an exception of me being a means. All right, because she's, like I said, she's immersed in the culture and the business, and they both share. So what she's doing is that she's wanting to do that. It's her own free will. Like, I'm just trying to illustrate in a torturous way the way how this thing could potentially work to remove cost and then to potentialize the indivisibility of our temporality is what I'm going. And I know this is taking a long bloody time because I have to frame everything always again when I do so. The context here, so let's just say, so one day, all right, I want to make an exception of my being a means, all right? But in that regards, it's the same thing as if she potentialized her time beyond the economic good that she received it at a later date, whereby because of what she did, she potentializes her to receive in kind of the manner that she gave. So if we're looking at it from the aspect of her labour, it's the same thing. It's the likewise. It's where she's giving credit for where the exception would play itself out within the ecosystem. Okay, because if you're talking about an ecosystem, and I always presuppose that it works from a retail ecosystem to potentialize an economy and a world. All right, so that means to say that the businesses that are all within the ecosystem do all different kinds of shit. Like, so, there's all different. So you're kind of trying to get it to mirror what would be everything that would be outside the ecosystem, like, say, just the economy in general, to be inside the ecosystem. But you're starting out, like I said, at a retail ecosystem, and you work your way kind of down by the way how this thing can get potentialized in a different kind of way. So, well, let's just presuppose that there's enough businesses there that the exceptions can be spread out where they are made. Now, this presupposes the way how that the exception is potentialized. So one of the ways that I envisage, if you're going to drive capability within it, is the way how that you utilize an algorithm to determine when they're made, because the random way that this would done. So let's just say for argument's sake that she will get paid $100. And so you say you got $100, but she foregoes that. She doesn't get paid $100. And so but it's kind of like the credit that she would get kind of equates to $100. So it's the way how that thing gets spread through the ecosystem will determine basically the equivocation of the money that she is foregone in that regards. Okay. So it's like, it works indirectly. It potentializes, like I said, if we're talking about removing money, it's potentializing she's potentializing her mean. So she's making an exception to that in order for her to receive, wherever the exception may play out within the ecosystem, but she can't determine that. All it's doing is potentializing it. So let's say if you're going to talk about the way how algorithms would work in that scenario, and you're literally looking at the profile for the specific person, well, then it's working on a probability. I got no idea how the fucking maths work on some shit like that, but that's the way how you would kind of do it, where it would be gamified, as it were. You'd use algorithms that is very much determined by what she's done. So in this case, she's made an exception on that one specific day. So in that regards, what she's deferring money so that she may receive. So in the context of her being a means, you could say, well, is she being a means then? Or is she more living, if the whole point of a business engaging with intangibles is obviously to disinhibit you towards that place, and so therefore more to address you as an end, and this girl is deciding that she wants to make an exception, so therefore to be an end, so to potentialize the means that she would make of herself in a way that she's spreading it out in her life. So, the one thing here, I mean, because it's like, well, does that work its way out over a day or over a week? I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of trying to frame it in a manner that you can kind of understand. So let's say that she's more temporalizing her being a means, because if the whole reason why she's doing, all right, so the reason why she's like in this business because she's immersed in the culture. The business is also immersed in the culture. So therefore, the understanding of what she's doing is very much predicated upon the indivisibility of her temporality. So if the business and everybody else, like all people, are focused on the indivisibility of our temporality, then ultimately when she makes an exception of her being a means, she's demonstrating the indivisibility of her temporality, of her considering herself to be an ends. Now, she's not being compensated for what she does. She's not being compensated then as a means. She's, if you can say, well, she's just deferring the compensation at a later date, and you could say, okay, well that kind of works. It makes sense. But she's potentializing what? Because, like I said, if you're giving if you're deferring the presupposition of money that gives you credit, all right, to secure your want, then when you receive, like from a person, so you might have potentialized your time beyond the economic good to receive at a later date, you're not receiving credit for the act that you've made. It's the gratitude that basically overcomes you when you do receive it. Because, like I said, as much as that you might be one person that's animating it, there's all these other people that are animating it. And so the nature of what's put into play, you're never the author of your you're the author of the world, as it were, because you're doing it with other people, but you can't lay claim to it like, it's an indirect exchange. Because if you were, say for instance, that you were to have the scenario that this girl makes, and they've bought for like the next day she goes and gets a coffee and she receives a coffee, so she equates it. Okay, well then that's just, that's what I did. I made an exception of my time and I received the coffee at a later date. Now, is that just making an indirect exchange, and so therefore you're obliterating the gratitude that otherwise you would feel to receive something? Because it's the culture that enables you receiving in a way where you're receiving the indivisibility of your temporality. This is the whole thing about it. So even if, let's say, that she had a sense that that there's credit of her act prior, but once again, the framing of the way how the acts emerge, you cannot give yourself that much credit because everybody else is doing the same thing. So once again, if everybody is doing the same thing, then you cannot give yourself credit for an act that, as much as that you might conflate the two, because it's the turns taken that enable the cultural dynamic to flourish in order for you to receive yourself as indivisible. Okay, so in that case, you are, so the exception is the way of, so the exception works. So in the case here, so if you're talking about the exception, it's the exception of the way that we make ourselves a means towards it. So you're really engendering it's engendering the culture that gives us the opportunity to receive ourselves as indivisible. So when you're looking at it from that aspect, it's the culture that gives the opportunity for us to receive ourselves as indivisible. Now, nobody is responsible for that as much as that the acts engender it. No specific one person. All right, everyone. It's a multitude of people. So in that way, what she does is that the culture that she's belong enables her to do that. Okay, she wouldn't do it otherwise, is what I'm saying, I suppose. Who fucking goes and works for a company and then says, hey, don't pay me an extra day, don't pay me for a day because I want to potentialize, my time beyond the economic good. I mean, when are you ever going to hear those words come out of anybody's mouth? And God knows whether or not you ever would. The point is that for a person to even get to that point of saying it indicates that the culture has some kind of gravitas, or has got some, is emerged enough that it's strong enough to support that opportunity for that girl to do that. Now, once again, I mean, the only reason why that culture is there for her to do that is because the culture has been engendered by all these other people. So even in the scenario of the coffee, you can never lay claim to that because you are part of a culture, and that culture is made up of the ethos that basically you are part of. So it's the opportunity that the culture allows for you to do that is the most important thing. So to lay claim to credit and then to kind of equate it to an indirect exchange that is, removing money as a medium. So the medium here would be time, but what is it? Time as a means? Or is it time as an end, to receive your time as an end, beyond the economic good, allowing the time given? So I always give context to this also, is the way how if you're unwinding the presupposition of us being the primary product, being a consumer, well, it's the artful way, and art is it's got nothing that you're not working against the constraint of time. So it's the time given to allow this. So literally this way of life that engenders an artful way of giving and receiving. And like I always say, that if you change the way how you give and receive, you change the way that you change the self that you give, and you change the self that you receive. They're qualitatively different because, once again, you're opening up the gratitude that otherwise you wouldn't demonstrate if you secured credit or money for yourself and went down and bought a coffee. You don't need we might say thanks to a person only as a gratuity or as a courtesy, just to kind of admit that they are a person that's serving us, but it really has no meaning outside that. I mean, how can you be I always say, can you be truly grateful if you've paid for something? Because money is credit. All right, and money secures you being in the market for that coffee in that instance. And so therefore the credit, you've secured credit for yourself. So you're not beholden to anybody. And this is why consumer sovereignty is always touted. It's about demand. A consumer is unreasonable because they have demand. Why? Because they have a credit that they've secured for themselves and they don't have to give thanks to anybody. This is essentially the kind of world in which we find ourselves beholden to. So if we're looking at a way of obviously unwinding that or removing that, it's a way of engendering gratitude, the way how that you're extending credit to the culture that you were immersed into, whereby even if you might have a sense that you contributed to it, you can't lay claim to it fully. So in the manner of looking at the indivisibility of her temporality, well, in that case, she's potentialized the mean of her existence by making an exception to her being a means, so literally securing the means, money, that would be used towards the end that she presupposes. So in that regard, she literally is temporalizing the indivisibility of her temporality by considering herself more to be an ends. It's just the way how it plays itself out through the exceptions that kind of animates that, demonstrates that, potentializes that. Because all it does is I always say the way how this thing works is the way how it can work. And because I'm framing it intellectually, obviously that's kind of problematic when you kind of framing it in an abstract way. But if you can understand the concept and the way how you go from the exceptions that business makes to the way how a person, that is their labour, they can make an exception of their labour. Now, we might give context to that and think that, well, that's just ridiculous. But that just presupposes the relation that we have with business. We consider our actions to be economising, all right? We don't consider them to be inherently creative. We resolve upon independence from the claim rather than a common surpassing, which is essentially what this girl would be orientated towards, and everybody else that's actually within that culture at large is the same thing that they're kind of focused on. So the mutual support that you give towards that. Now, in the context of, say, the other businesses that would have made it exceptions, that's what they potentialise. Because if through them becoming part of the ecosystem means to say there's a lot more support towards what the businesses does, well, that's the way how it differentiates themselves within the market. And so if you're going to look from a competitive and inverted commas advantage, well, when you're looking at the relation beyond want to creativity and the way how you're potentializing a person's labour in that manner, and the way how this girl's made an exception of her labour for this specific business, would she be doing the same thing for another business that was outside the ecosystem? That's the thing that's the thing which I'm rambling on about to try get you to kind of see, because then you realise that it's got nothing to do with the intangibles that business tout. It's got to do with the indivisibility of our temporality and the way how that we accept ourselves as marginal, and we accept that we can produce time as an economic good. And if time is an economic good, it just lays claim to us. It's a sheer claim on our temporality when money is a given. And so, we have to give ourselves credit for us potentializing life in a different way. And essentially, that's what we all partake of. We're giving ourselves credit. Why are we giving ourselves credit? Because essentially, if we bequeath this as a way of life to other people, then that's basically what our ancestors will be grateful for, that we did this, that we potentialise life in a way that they receive life the manner how we receive a market-orientated way of life. They receive life in a different manner. And the only reason why they receive it is because we made it so, and that's the legacy of our actions. Anyway, until next time, that was kind of long-winded. So I hope, something good came out of it. Anyway, till next time, take care.